Okay, it's almost precisely the top of the hour, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to get going, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. We will be recording this session, so if you need to and would like to see it afterwards, please feel free, and on top of it, share it with your colleagues. My name is Paul Siebel from Starweaver. I will spend about a minute and a half, no more, introducing us and introducing you to Dan Burnett, who is the expert in VXML. He'll tell you a little about his background, and then jump into the presentation of this standard and technology. So very briefly, let me just make sure that the screen is advancing. Very briefly, Starweaver is a fintech and company that does a lot of technology and IT training, as well as finance training for major institutions around the world. We do this live and online. A sample of our client base is here, from big banks and technology companies to government agencies and departments. Really have no restrictions. We work throughout the world on every continent. The primary core of our business is, as I said, IT, enterprise IT technologies, business skills, finance skills, project management, Lean, Scrum, Agile, Kanban, etc. We have a library of online courses, but we also focus really on hands-on instructor, practitioner-led, and Dan will tell you more about that because he is, in fact, just that kind of person. And the point of our programs is really to transfer knowledge and skills so that you can really have tools you use when you go back to your workplace. Here are some upcoming webinars. We do them typically once or twice a week. We try to present leading-edge technologies and tools, and all facilitated by experts, typically 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesdays and Thursdays. This is 1 p.m. on Thursday. Here are some upcoming programs. The VXML is today. Next week we'll have a Managing Agile Projects with Jira, and we will then be doing chatbots next week as well on an AI technology. Angular 2, which is an important framework for those of you who do software development, and WebRTC is another one of Dan's babies, and he'll do that in a few weeks out. By attending the webinar, you get access to one of our free courses for life, one of our courses which will be free to you for life and not free in general. But don't need to take these lists down. If you look in the chat window at the right, you'll see a link. All you have to do to get access to one of these courses is fill out the survey. Tell us how Dan did. Tell us what you liked. Tell us what you didn't like, etc. So again, the link is here. It is in the chat box. Pretty easy to remember. SurveyMonkey/r/HHZS85D. Again, Dan has extensive experience in web standards, internet standards. He is the creator of the VoicexML standard. He'll tell you a little about himself more, that he can do better than I can. And if you need help or support or anything, just email Rand or me, and we can do that for you. And with that, Rand, I'll ask you to pass the presentation over to Dan. Perfect.
All right, good. Sorry, folks. Okay, so I'm going to talk about VoicexML. But let me do a little bit more history about myself first. So my background is actually in automatic speech recognition. I have a PhD in that. It was actually neural networks for speech recognition, which is something which is, was not as popular back when I did it, but has become incredibly popular in recent years because of the deep learning neural networks. So, that's really a big thing that I think is going to push the use of technologies like VoicexML forwards. So I got my degree in speech recognition and started to work for Nuance, probably the most well-known company that does speech recognition software, voice recognition software today. While there, I started working on a new standard called VoicexML. So this was back around '99. I'll be talking more about that, obviously, but there were, a few companies that started it. AT&T, IBM, Motorola, and Lucent, and it was I actually thought it was a bad idea when it first started, frankly. I thought it was kind of a big step backwards in terms of sophistication, but it was a big step backwards in the same way that HTML was a big step backwards for the desktop publishing community, meaning that no one cared because actually the benefits that you got were really incredible. So we all know what HTML did. So I worked on VoicexML, worked for a number of different companies while working on VoicexML, including one named Voxeo. And while at Voxeo, I started working on another standard called WebRTC, which again I'm going to be talking about in mid-March, but just very briefly. WebRTC lets you do peer-to-peer calls, communications within your browser. Think of it sort of like Skype in a web browser. So that's another standard from the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, which is where I worked on VoicexML, same organization that developed HTML. And I actually have co-written a book on that. I'm one of the lead editors of the WebRTC specifications today. More recently, I've started working on another standards activity called verifiable claims. And essentially, it's a way to deal with sort of the identity problem on the web by not talking about identity, but by instead talking about what are the claims that are being made that can be verified. So, that this person is over 21 and therefore eligible to purchase alcohol in most states in the United States. So anyway, that's another standard that's coming up. Basically, I've have been heavily involved in standards actually for many years now, and so I have my own consulting business, Standards Play, through which I help companies play the standards game. So for companies that are interested in learning how to work in web and internet standards, so W3C and IETF in particular, I'd be happy to help you. Okay, so I can't talk about VoicexML without talking about IVR. And IVR stands for Interactive Voice Response. It's basically a very fancy name for automated phone answering. It is, in fact, what every company does that has a call center today. Right? If you call just about any business, any organization, you're going to get a recording that answers that call. Now, the oldest systems, of course, required you to press buttons, right? Press 1 for sales, press 2 for marketing, blah, 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 blah. Okay, press 2 for support, 3, hopefully they don't actually send you to marketing. But one of the things that started happening in the late 1990s and early 2000s was the ability to productively use speech recognition technology. And that really is one of the drivers for what I'm talking about today. Many of you, I'm sure, have called to speak with a company's support line and ended up getting a system where you could actually speak your answer as well. Now, this may sound obvious to many people today, but it wasn't that obvious back in the, right around 2000. Now, when people talk about IVR, interactive voice response, typically they're only referring to what we would call the voice channel or the DTMF channel. The DTMF is, pressing buttons on the phone. And I have to mention that today because there's an awful lot of multi-channel stuff happening now on mobile devices. So if you have a smartphone, your smartphone may let you interact in ways beyond just voice or DTMF. But traditionally, IVR systems were designed to be used over the phone. So I want to talk a little bit about this. There are plenty of people today who will say, hey, look, people are using web. Actually, they're not even using web anymore. They're using mobile. Mobile is everything, right? Mobile apps, that's how people want to communicate. So why would you even talk about using VoicexML to speak over the phone? I mean, who really needs that? Well, if you think about it, your web technologies, your mobile technologies do require a laptop or a smartphone and internet connectivity. And it turns out that actually that's not available everywhere. On top of it, there's a huge amount of older phone answering technology out there that's being migrated more and more to the cloud. Almost all of the VoicexML deployments are what we would call cloud IVR. A recent analyst report is expecting a global market by 2022 of about $3.5 billion. We're a little above $500 million today, We expect to see significant growth, largely because of the interest in virtual assistants. I mean, many people are familiar with Alexa, Google Home, etc. So these services are reintroducing speech as a medium, so spoken input as a medium to consumers. And as the technology gets better and better and better, it provides a lot of opportunities, which I'll talk about in a moment, to do things beyond what you can do when you actually have to push buttons on your smartphone. But one other comment I want to make is about other markets where this is absolutely crucial even today. I have a friend who has done some presentations and training and tutorials and so on in Africa of VoicexML. And they actually are a large number of poor countries there where the population may not be literate. In fact, she actually visited villages where there were rural farmers who absolutely could not read or write. And the village had one flip phone, right? So not even a smartphone. It was just a really simple, as they call them, feature phone. So just a flip phone that was used by everyone in the village. So they shared it. Now, what did the farmers do with that? Well, they would use that phone to call and get a weather report. They would use that phone to leave a recording about their crops and what was available. And you might wonder, well, how could they use that? Well, they just learned which buttons they had to press, right? And it may sound silly to us who are used to using smartphones, but this was a big deal for many of these people, that they could be trained. They hit a button and it speed dials a certain number, and then they know they have to press that 3 button, and then the 5 button, and then the 2, and then the 7, and then it does what they want. So for them, this simple phone access was phenomenally valuable. And in fact, when you start including speech recognition in it as well, especially a repetitive interface that someone is able to learn to use in a country like this, I think we're just going to see tremendous growth in essentially a voice-only market. The analysts I was referring to are actually expecting noticeable growth, particularly in the developing regions, is where we're going to see a lot of this kind of growth. So I want to talk a little bit about voice input. I mentioned that voice input can be quite useful. So, it's always been the case that if you have a physical disability of some sort, such as blindness or poor dexterity, then voice input is incredibly useful. There are a lot of people who actually find it very difficult to hit specific buttons on a keypad, even on a smartphone. Smartphones are designed for really, for people in their 20s with really good eyesight and dexterity. But I think we're going to be seeing a change in interfaces as more and more older people and more people without, really good physical dexterity or eyesight begin to encounter problems with existing applications on phones. So related to that, phone sizes have been increasing, and there's a reason for that. Okay, again, people find it easier to use a bigger screen to do what they need to do, whether it's seeing what's there or whether it's hitting, a button that's there. You know what? You can just throw all that away. If you look at the Amazon Echo, you look at Google's Home, both of those devices, no keyboard, no screen, right? Basically, you just talk to them. So speech it's a very natural interface. So we're seeing real devices that are having real value and real uptake by consumers that have no keyboards. Another reason this is useful is if callers are actually working with their hands and eyes. And again, this is one of the reasons why these sort of home-based devices that aren't even mobile, right, are so useful. You have someone in the kitchen cooking dinner, it's very convenient for them to be able to talk. We can all talk while we're doing other things. That's something we're not born being able to do that, but pretty close, right? It's actually very convenient to be able to have interactions like this anytime during the day. Now, we're used to that with our smartphones, but again, let's say you only have a phone connection. You're not always going to be able to reach someone at 3 a.m. but you are going to be able to reach an automated service. And if the automated service is designed well, and yes, I understand that there are many that are quite irritating to work with, but that's a matter of design. If they are designed well, they can actually be quite pleasant to use and quite productive for people when a human being isn't available. Related to that, right, is this instant connection. You don't get a "thank you for calling, please hold" right away. Right? You actually get an opportunity to provide some information that's useful that may eventually get you to the right person, or in the case of a VoicexML application, you may be able to provide much of the information directly yourself. This is, I think it's less of an issue now because the devices are getting more capable, but again, for some of the older devices, it's a challenge for some of them actually. For people in some languages to actually enter information efficiently, because the keyboards were not necessarily designed for that. There are people, particularly in some of the Asian countries, for whom it's not necessarily super fast to enter words. Now they still text, obviously. The world texts, but how wonderful is it to be able to speak, right, and have your information be entered that way. One other thing that VoicexML doesn't take advantage of particularly, but there are extensions to it that do, is an ability to track emotion. This is something that is of increasing interest, in fact. I know that researchers working on speech technologies are paying a lot of attention to the emotion conveyed by the speaker. This is something that I expect to see in these home-based devices as well, is emotion detection and response, right? Responding differently when the person is upset in some way. There are already some interesting articles coming out about, what if a crime occurs in a building, in a house, in a room where one of these devices is on and listening. It may be possible to actually pick up useful information through detection of emotion in what the person says. Actually, for some devices, there's no internet required. That's, again, less and less the case. But with VoicexML just requires a phone connection. The servers that VoicexML then uses will require an internet connection. But to just speak with the VoicexML application, all you need is a basic phone service. We tend to think of ourselves as always having connectivity, but anyone who's gone camping or hiking, or heck, anyone who's done a drive across country has definitely experienced significant loss of data access and knowing that they only have voice access. Okay, now I want to talk about sort of the life before VoicexML. Why, and lead up to why is it that we have VoicexML. So traditionally, and again, this is pre-2000, pre-2002, 2003, somewhere in there, IVRs were implemented on custom hardware using custom software that actually resided in telecommunications companies' central offices. The central office was the building. I'm sorry, here's someone speaking in the background? Okay. So the central office is the building that your hardwired phone connected to, right? So there would be one for a regional area. And these devices that supported IVR capabilities were physical pieces of hardware that would be located in those central offices. Obviously, upgrading the hardware on these things was incredibly slow, right? So to actually roll out a service like this and have it cover any kind of decent geographical area required software modifications, and often there would need to be hardware upgrades as well. And those hardware upgrades, really, it requires a human being to go out there and make those changes. I mean, that was just crazy. I mean, we were already living in the internet world then, and it was just insane to think that you had to use this custom hardware and software. When you would create an application, the applications were often updated via dial-in connections, right? So you would create your application locally, then there would be some dial-in connection to a server somewhere. Your application would get updated there, and then you would, if you were lucky, you could push a button that would say, okay, now send this out to, deploy this, right? And at that point, the deployment server, in many cases, had to then actually do its own dial-up connection to each of these boxes in the central offices and upload the application and make it go live. Eventually, there were internet connections for that. But still, the whole process was just really, really slow. It was tedious, it was slow, and it was expensive to roll out updated phone-based services. This is what they were called because the only way you could do them was through the telecommunications company. It was your local carrier, your local physical line carrier that actually had the ability to do this. As a result, development time for these services was typically measured in years. Even once it sped up, development time was measured in large numbers of months. Now, at the same time, speech technology, voice recognition, speech recognition technology had its own problems. There were a number of APIs for using speech recognizers. Each vendor of speech technology had its own API.